Well, hello, Miss Thomas, and hello, Year 2. Thank you ever so much for inviting me into your classroom to talk a little bit about Easter and answer some questions that you've posed. And firstly, can I just say what amazing questions you've asked? When I first read them, I thought that Miss Thomas, she's got confused. She's gone and asked Year 6 to give me some questions because they are super questions, much more in depth and questioning than I was expecting from Year 2. So thank you. And without further ado, I'm going to answer each one of those questions. So here's question 1. So why do we call it Easter? And does the E in Easter stand for egg? Well, no, the E in Easter doesn't stand for egg. I thought the easiest way to find out why we call things what we call them is to have a look in our dictionaries. And there, under Easter, it says that the word Easter originates from an Old English word, Eastra, and that apparently that comes from a German word for a goddess called Erstra. And what that's all about is way back before Jesus walked the earth, so more than 2,000 years ago, different areas of the world had different religions. And in Europe and in the United Kingdom, the religions had lots and lots of different gods and goddesses for different things, different seasons, different landscapes. There's a whole lot of gods. And so it would appear that this Erstra was the goddess of spring, the time when we have, well, new life, flowers blooming, baby animals coming about. And so when Christianity came to Europe, soon after Jesus's life and death and resurrection, then the people thought, right, well, we need to celebrate this. When would be a good time to celebrate it? And as there was already this special celebration of spring, of new life, they thought that Easter would be a good time, or Erstra would be a good time to celebrate Jesus's death and resurrection. So that's why we call it Easter and why we sort of have it this time. It doesn't mean that the actual event of Jesus dying on a cross happened roughly March or April. We have no idea what time of the year it actually happened. It's just that we mark it at this time. So that's question 1. Let's look at the next question. So why are the eggs that the Easter Bunny brings made of chocolate? And why does the Easter Bunny only visit some people? And this is where I have to admit, I don't know. The Easter Bunny is not mentioned in the Bible at all. He or she has nothing to do with the Christian faith at all. So that is a rather difficult question for me to answer. I guess it's just a reminder that life is full of mysteries and wonder. And some questions we will never get the answer to. And so perhaps we could just wait and maybe we'll find out one day when we are older, or when we meet somebody who has more experience. But I'm afraid I can't help you with the Easter Bunny. Okay, on to the next question. So why do we hide and collect eggs? Is it anything to do with the Easter story? I didn't know the answer to this. I've done a little bit of research for you. And apparently, it seems to go back to the late 16th century, so 1580, 1590, sometime around there. And in those days, while today you'll probably find either chocolate eggs are hidden or eggs are hidden in, or something is hidden in little plastic eggs. In back in those days, obviously we didn't have chocolate, we didn't have plastic, and so ordinary eggs would be painted, decorated, and then apparently they would be hidden in fields, usually by the men of the village, and then the women and the children would go and find them. It doesn't have anything to do with the Easter story as such, although it sounds from my reading that this whole practice started in churches in Germany. And possibly some people have said one idea is, as I've mentioned, Easter was about spring and about new life, and obviously eggs are a good example of new life, because eggs, if we don't have them for omelettes and scrambled egg and fried egg and all that, eggs will develop into baby chicks and then into chickens. So there's that sort of, the use of eggs is just that sort of hint of new life, and therefore the birth, the death and resurrection of Jesus. So yes, that's why we hide and collect eggs. Didn't become popular in this country until they reckon Queen Victoria was on the throne, which was in the 19th century. Most of the 19th century, just got into the 20th century. And she was married to a German prince, Prince Albert. And so they reckon that it's quite likely that he brought over the idea, and then she made it popular within her family. And so if the Queen does it, then it seemed like a good idea for everybody to have a go. And so it spread. And then these days, as I say, it's become extremely popular and a good way of selling chocolate eggs. Right, on to the next question. So why did they put him on a cross? Why did Jesus have to die? Why did his enemies hate him so much? What did he even do wrong? Quite some meaty questions there, my goodness. So I'm just going to touch on each one of those one at a time. So why did they put him on a cross? Well, a cross was a way that the Romans used to execute troublemakers during their time as an empire. And it was not... It was a very, very cruel way of killing somebody. Somebody could hang on a cross for literally days. It wasn't as though, it wasn't that they, yeah, I won't go into all the details, but yes, it took a long, long time for them to die. So it was a way that if someone was a troublemaker, maybe they tried to cause a riot or something like that, it was a way that the Romans could sort of put this guy on a cross, stick him out in somewhere where he was on public view, and it was a warning to everybody: you mess with us and this is what's going to happen to you. So it was a way not just of killing the person, getting the person out of the way, but sort of discouraging anybody else from causing them any problems. And it was realized that it was such a horrible way of killing people that it was only allowed for those who weren't Roman citizens. If a Roman did something wrong, they were not allowed to be killed by being put on the cross. They would be killed in a much quicker way. So why did Jesus have to die? And I guess this is right at the center of the whole of the understanding of Christianity. In the Old Testament, the bit of the Bible before Jesus walked on the earth, it talks about the fact that we should try our best to follow the guidance that God has given us about how to behave, how to care for one another, how to look after this world. And it sort of says, when you don't do that, well, God's not happy. God is very, very displeased, and there needs to be some sort of payment for that. Just like today, you know, if I was to break the law, if I was to, you know, drive my car too quickly or something worse than that, I would be expected to be punished for that. I would have have to be fined or something like that. And so back in the times before Jesus, what would happen was to sort of put things right with God, an animal would be sacrificed. And so there was a lot of animals sacrificed in Jerusalem every year. And what would happen would be the person who felt that they had done wrong would put their hand on the animal as a way of almost sort of pretending that you're transferring the wrong things you've done to the animal, and then the animal would die in your place. But obviously that meant a lot of animals were dying, and it didn't sort things out. It meant, you know, the next time you did something wrong, you'd have to kill another animal. The next time you did something wrong, you'd have to kill another animal. And that just wasn't fair on animals, let alone life in general. So when Jesus came, there's plenty of sort of things in the Bible that hint that he was going to come and put things right once and for all. And so the understanding is that when he died on the cross, he was like, well, they call him the Lamb of God in places in the Bible. In other words, he was like the animal or the human being that died for everybody. And it wasn't something that he would have to do lots and lots of times. Somehow, when Jesus died on the cross, the understanding is he died for every wrong that we have done, and every wrong that has been done by anybody else in the past, and any wrong that we've done in the future, that we'll do in the future, because we still mess up, don't we? And so that's why he had to die, to take on all the wrongdoing that human beings have done, and to take the punishment for us. Why did his enemies hate him so much? Well, probably there was a lot of stuff going on. Some people, they reckon, were just very jealous because people liked Jesus. He taught some incredible stuff, and there's stories of him healing people and accepting people that were deemed to be outcasts. And so he was very popular. And so some people, particularly the sort of Jewish religious leaders, were jealous. But there was also more than that. Some people feared that he might cause a rebellion. That if he got this great big crowd behind him, that people might go, right, let's get rid of the Romans, because most of the people in Israel did not like having Rome as their rulers. And so there was the fear that, well, let's get rid of him, let's make an example of him, and then hopefully that would discourage any chances of a riot, which would cause Rome to come down on them too heavy and cause a lot more problems for them. So there was other things going on as well. What did he even do wrong? Well, the understanding in the Bible is that he never did anything wrong. And that was the important part, that the only one that could really sacrifice for all of us was someone who didn't have to be sacrificed for themselves. And Jesus, because he did no wrong, was able to do that. They called him the perfect sacrifice as the Lamb of God. So I hope that explains. It's quite a complicated thing, and this is why I was amazed that this came from year 2, because when I was at college learning more about the Bible, questions like this we wrestled with as adults. Okay, on to the next question. So why did Jesus' friend Judas Iscariot, betray him? Well, again, there's several ideas here. The easiest way of understanding it is it mentions in the Bible that he was offered 30 silver coins to betray Jesus. So maybe it was just greed. Maybe he just quite liked the idea of becoming rich, because 30 silver coins was a fair bit in those days. But somebody else, or several people, have come up with the idea that maybe Judas wasn't happy with the way Jesus was doing things. That Judas may have been one of these people that wanted the Romans kicked out of Israel. And he was hoping that Jesus was going to lead some form of revolution that would get all the people to rise up and kick the Romans out. And yet what clearly became evident from what Jesus said was that that wasn't the way he was going to do things. I mean, Jesus actually spoke to the Romans, their enemies, just like he spoke to anybody else. He actually healed a servant of a Roman centurion. And he talked about the fact that, you know, we're always encouraged to pray for our friends and pray for the people that are close to us. But Jesus said, pray for your enemies, love your enemies. And therefore, that was quite a challenge to everybody hearing that when their enemies were in charge of their country. So it may well be that Judas hoped that by betraying Jesus and by getting him arrested, that the people in Jerusalem and in Israel would go, hang on a minute, you can't take our friend from us, and start to rebel against Rome. Of course, it didn't happen, and Judas in the end regretted what he had done, but felt so helpless that in the end he committed suicide rather than sorting himself out with Jesus and apologizing or anything like that. So on to the next question. So why did Jesus rise again? And did he know he was going to come back from the dead? Well, I guess Jesus had to rise again, because if you imagine Jesus dying on the cross and him being buried and just that's it, like anybody else, then how could we know that he had done what he'd come to do? In other words, die for our sins and sort out the wrongdoing and things. So he had to come back to sort of say, look, I've sorted it. I've dealt with it. I have defeated it. And there's the talk that not only did he defeat our wrongdoing, but in some way he defeated death. Christians believe that when we die, that's the end of us on this earth, that we are, that is just sort of a new stage of our lives almost, in that we live with God from then on. So yes, he needed to come back to demonstrate that he had done what he had set out to do. And did he know he was going to come back from the dead? Yes, there's some things he said. He was quite careful in the way he said things. So he didn't make it clear to people exactly what was going to happen. But at one stage, and I need to explain this, he talked about the temple, the big place of worship in Jerusalem for the Jewish people. And the temple was understood to be the place where you went to talk to God. There was this understanding that in some way God was present in that temple. And Jesus, at one stage when he was talking to the Jewish leaders, said to them, the temple is going to be destroyed, and 3 days later I'm going to rebuild it. And so the Jewish leaders go, what are you on about? It's taken us ages to build this temple. And how on earth can you rebuild it in three days? But what Jesus was sort of saying is, you know, I am God, I'm the presence of God. And actually, yeah, I am going to be destroyed. I'm going to be crucified on the cross. And 3 days later, I'm going to come back. So he was hinting at it. And so much in the Bible, the disciples, his friends, don't actually work out what he's saying until later. It's almost as though the penny drops and, oh, when he said this, he wasn't talking about the temple as the building. He was talking about himself. Oh, it all begins to make sense now. And so there's a lot of that going on in the Bible, that, you know, Jesus's plans were always being born in Bethlehem, blah, 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 spend time teaching people about various things, go to Jerusalem, know that he was going to die on the cross, die, rise again. He knew all that, but other people had all these different ideas about him. And it was only after his death and his resurrection that it all became clear, at least to some people. So how did Jesus move the stone in the tomb without any help? Why did he surprise Mary about coming back to life? And why didn't the angel Gabriel tell her? Right, well, we're not entirely sure how the stone was moved. It might have been Jesus. We're not quite sure. Obviously, he'd gone into the tomb, understood to be dead. So it's difficult to know whether he did it or whether God did it or whether God sent angels to do it. We're not entirely sure. All we know is somehow the tomb was opened. Why did he surprise Mary about coming back to life? Well, the obvious answer to that is, well, we don't expect people to come back to life, do we? So suddenly to appear there would be a surprise for Mary. If what you're saying is why did he do that? Well, at some stage he was going to have to appear to his friends. And so there's no easy way for somebody who's been dead to reappear and sort of say, hey, here I am. It will be a surprise to everybody. He had, as I say, he had hinted at the fact that he was going to come back from the dead, but they didn't quite get it. And certainly, you know, Mary and her friends had gone to the tomb expecting a dead body, expecting to apply some spices. And I don't know about you, but if you're you've got plans in your mind, this is what I'm going to do today, and then suddenly something completely out of the blue goes, why? It's not always easy to sort of go, oh, okay, right, I would just deal with this differently. Sometimes we just go, and I guess that's quite a surprise to Mary. Why didn't the angel Gabriel tell her? Well, in some of the Gospels, there is reference to the angel, and there is this indication that perhaps an angel did tell her that Jesus wouldn't be found in the tomb, and that she and her friends were to go to the disciples and say, Jesus has risen. Trouble is, in Jesus's time, and this is where, unfortunately, it's a bit, I'm glad we've moved on from this. If a woman said something, you couldn't trust it in Jesus's time. Now, it was far better to have a man tell you, which is terrible, isn't it? But that was the understanding in those days. To believe something, you needed a witness and someone to back up the witness if they were men. If they were women, you needed a lot more people, because there was this understanding that women just gossiped. Now, I don't believe that. That was way back then in those days. As I say, I'm glad that it's moved on. So just, you know, an angel telling Mary, hey, this is what's happened to Jesus. Well, as I say, they were told to go and tell the disciples, but probably the problem is that if they'd gone to the disciples and told them that, the disciples would, oh, you're only women, I'm not going to listen to you. On to the last question, I think, before I get myself in too much trouble. So how did Jesus get up to heaven when he left? Well, this is in the book of Acts. It describes that Jesus met with his disciples and told them that they were to continue his work by going around the known world at those times and share what they had discovered about Jesus, about his love for them and for the world, and all the good news about him dying and rising again for the things that we've done wrong. And then it describes him as going into heaven in a cloud. Now, perhaps he did. Perhaps a cloud came down, picked him up, and off he went up into heaven. I think a lot of the challenging things in the Bible is the Bible talks about God's relationship with us and some of the incredible things that God does with us. And some of those things are things that we've never experienced. I have never seen anybody go up into the sky on a cloud. And so it may have happened exactly like that, or it may have been the guy who wrote the book of Acts, which is Luke, who wrote one of the Gospels. It may be just him seeing something happen or being told that something happened. I'm thinking, how do I describe this? Because I can't picture it. I've never experienced this. Well, maybe it's something like a cloud. So it could well be that Luke is just trying to describe something that he doesn't know how to describe because he hasn't got the words or the experience to say it. You know, it's like, I guess, you know, if you're just shown the picture of an animal that you've not seen before, the easiest way to describe that animal is to sort of use, well, it's a bit like a dog. It wasn't a dog, but it was a bit like a dog, but it was a different color than the dog, and things like that. Well, perhaps Luke was just trying to say, well, it was something cloud-like, and somehow Jesus just rose into the sky, but I can't really explain how it happened. So that's what the Bible says, that he rose into heaven in the cloud, but quite what that actually physically meant for those disciples there, we could only assume that it was something beyond their understanding. So I hope that answers all your questions. Feel free to come back to me with more, and thank you ever so much. I do love wrestling with the questions that you ask because I think they are fantastic. So if I don't see you again before, have a wonderful Easter. If you have a chance to go on an Easter egg hunt, go and do it and have fun. I think the Lady Grove Residents Association are organising a sort of Easter egg hunt in the Easter holidays, so perhaps you might like to take part in that. But whatever you do, have a wonderful Easter, and I'll see you again soon. God bless.